The stolen Glock was aimed straight at my chest, her finger trembling on the trigger as she screamed, "You ruined everything." In that split second between life and death, all I could hear was the thunder of hooves, my 320-pound Ram Justice charging like a missile. What happened next would not only save my life, but unravel the biggest land fraud scheme Montana had ever seen. The air in Montana is different. It smells like wild grass, old trees, and freedom. That's what I told myself 6 months ago, standing on the porch of my newly purchased dream, 50 acres of untouched pastureland in Riverstone Ridge, Montana. I'd walked away from a 20-year tech career in Silicon Valley, trading firewalls and burnout for cedar posts and livestock. I was 48, single, recently retired from Meta where I'd built systems that kept billions of people's data safe, and all I wanted now was to build a damn fence. That's it. A simple, beautiful, handcrafted cedar fence to wrap around my property, keep the livestock in and the predators out. I had it all planned out, 7 feet tall, 100% legal, and built to last longer than I would. But what I didn't plan for was Beatrice Langford. The first time I saw her, I was waist-deep in post holes, sweat pouring down my back. She marched across my gravel drive in a red blazer sharp enough to cut steel, her heels crunching like gunfire. "Excuse me," she barked like I was trespassing on her front lawn. "You can't build that fence. It violates HOA Aesthetic Regulation 42B. I looked up, confused. The HOA booklet says 8 feet max, mine's only 7. She narrowed her eyes. "That regulation is being amended at the next board meeting. 5 feet will be the new limit. You're building in violation of pending code." I blinked. That's not how rules work. You can't enforce a law that doesn't exist yet. Her expression told me otherwise. I'm the HOA president. I know what's best for this community. That structure is not in keeping with the design integrity of Riverstone Ridge. I glanced at my polished cedar panels. Design integrity? This wasn't Beverly Hills. This was ranchland. Coyotes didn't give a damn about matching fence colors. Still, I kept my voice even. With respect, I reviewed the bylaws thoroughly. What I'm doing is compliant. She didn't answer. Just took out her phone and started snapping pictures of the fence from every angle, muttering documentation under her breath. Then she pulled a tape measure out of her oversized leather purse and started measuring the posts. I watched in stunned silence. "You'll be hearing from us," she snapped before turning on her heel and vanishing down the drive like a judgmental tornado. That night, I couldn't sleep. Beatrice's face kept flashing in my mind, along with the way she said us like she ran a covert agency, not a housing association. I started digging. Old habits die hard, and I hadn't spent 2 decades in cybersecurity to just sit back and let some HOA tyrant push me around. I pulled up public records, reviewed the last 6 years of HOA amendments, scanned real estate transactions, and found a disturbing trend. 12 regulation changes, each one targeting a specific homeowner. Mailbox paint, lawn decor, bird feeders, even curtain colors. Residents fined hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars. In each case, within 3 months, the homeowners sold. Every property was purchased by the same LLC, Pinecrest Holdings. A shadowy shell company with no phone number, no website, no employees listed. Just a mailing address in Billings and a silent acquisition pattern. One of the names on the property filings caught my eye, Dennis Blake. That name was familiar. 2 weeks earlier, a man with a clipboard had shown up in a van labeled Montana Environmental Compliance Services, saying he was conducting a runoff inspection. He cited me for excessive nitrogen saturation in the livestock zone and handed me a printed fine of $2,000. The letterhead had looked off, pixelated and uneven like it had been pulled from a Google image search and slapped on Word. Turns out Dennis Blake wasn't some government agent. He was Beatrice Langford's brother-in-law. And his company? Registered at the same address as Pinecrest Holdings. My heart pounded as I pieced it together. The fines, the rule changes, the sales, all connected. Beatrice wasn't protecting the Neighborhood. She was systematically forcing people out and flipping properties through a shell company. It was a racket, and I just tripped into the middle of it. I installed 6 security cameras around my property, 2 facing the road, the rest on the fencing perimeter. I upgraded the motion sensors and placed trail cams in the brush. A week later, I had footage of Beatrice's black Lexus SUV circling my drive at 3:17 a.m., windows down, headlights off. The next morning, my fence had been vandalized. "Take it down" was spray-painted in blood-red letters across a 25-foot stretch of that beautiful cedar. Rico, my ranch hand, stood next to me shaking his head. "Senor Ethan, that woman is bruja-level crazy. You should call the sheriff." But I didn't. Not yet. I needed more. I spent every evening combing through local complaints, zoning disputes, permit records. Turns out I wasn't the only one. The Richardsons had been fined for planting non-native grass, even though it was county approved. The Nguyen's were forced to remove solar panels because they violated reflective harmony. The worst was the Canellas, who were fined $500 a day for keeping a therapy goat for their autistic son. They moved out in tears. Pinecrest Holdings bought their house within 30 days. I began to suspect this wasn't just about real estate. It was strategic. Planned. And then I found them, survey stakes on the far end of my property line, freshly driven into the soil. No city markings, no explanation. Just orange ribbon flapping in the breeze like a warning flag. I pulled one out and found a note rubber-banded to the stake. "You're in the way." That night, I sat on my porch watching the stars blink to life over the hills, a rifle across my lap and my ram, Justice, grazing silently a few yards away. I'd raised him from a lamb. He was massive now, 320 pounds of muscle, thick-horned, calm and less provoked. People always laughed when I said he was trained like a guard dog. They weren't laughing anymore. Beatrice had made this personal. But I wasn't scared. I was angry. They thought I'd be just another tech transplant who didn't want trouble. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't a programmer anymore. I was a rancher. And someone had just tried to steal my land. The night air was crisp and quiet, the kind of stillness that makes you feel like the world is finally at peace. But peace in Riverstone Ridge was a lie, and I knew it. I was sitting on my porch, a mug of coffee in one hand and my laptop open in the other, combing through more financial filings and property transfers. Justice, my Icelandic ram, grazed a few yards away, his hulking frame silhouetted against the moonlight. A week had passed since I found the survey stakes on my land, and in that time, the vandalism escalated. Someone had let the air out of my truck tires. My livestock feed had been slashed open and ruined with motor oil. Someone even left a note nailed to my barn door that simply read, "Leave or bleed." Subtle. The sheriff's deputy shrugged when I showed him the threats. "Could be teens," he offered. "Or just bad neighbors." But he didn't write anything down. Didn't even ask for the footage I offered. Either he was lazy, or he knew better than to mess with Beatrice Langford. I wasn't sure which scared me more. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I stayed up late, reading over HOA bylaws again, matching them to purchase dates, comparing satellite imagery to land filings, building a case one timestamp at a time. That's when I heard it, a low bleat followed by a distant thud. I stood up, heart racing. Another thud. Then silence. I grabbed my flashlight and sprinted toward the back pasture, my boots crunching against frosty grass. Justice was gone from where he'd been grazing. That was strange. He usually didn't wander at night. I scanned the field and spotted movement, something small and fast darting across the shadows. A coyote. It was heading straight for my lamb pen. But Justice got there first. With a roar more than a bleat, he hurled himself at the predator, horns down, legs pounding the earth like drumbeats. The coyote yelped and bolted. But Justice, full of adrenaline and fury, didn't stop. He crashed through the boundary gate and kept going, straight. through the split-rail fence that divided my property from Beatrice Langford's immaculate garden estate. I shouted his name and took off after him, crashing through the broken gate as the beam of my flashlight caught what had become the epicenter of pure destruction. Beatrice's legendary English rose garden, the one she bragged about at every community meeting, lay in ruin. Petals littered the ground like confetti after a war. Trellises were toppled. A marble cherub lay decapitated. Her prized Princess Diana heritage rose bush, which she'd once claimed was worth more than her car, was a shattered stump. And in the middle of it all stood Justice, snorting and triumphant, a red bloom dangling from his mouth like a victory cigar. "Oh, buddy," I whispered, "we're gonna be on the news." I spent the rest of the night trying to repair what I could. I resecured the boundary gate, checked on the lambs, and got Justice back into his pen with the promise of apples and head scratches. But there was no salvaging the roses. Dawn came too fast. I hadn't slept, and my body felt like it had been run over by a tractor. At 7:02 a.m., the pounding on my door shook the entire house. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I opened the door to see Beatrice Langford standing on my porch, hair wild, lipstick smeared, shaking with rage. Her red power suit was wrinkled and covered in flecks of mud. She looked like a Wall Street executive who had lost a bar fight. "You," she shrieked, shoving her phone in my face. Photos of the wreckage flicked past in furious succession. "Do you have any idea what that ram did? My roses. My property. My legacy." "Beatrice," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I'm truly sorry. A coyote was threatening my flock. Justice chased it off and crashed through the fence. I'll cover the damages." "Damages?" she spat. "Those roses were insured for $60,000. That fountain came from Italy. You think a check can fix this?" I stepped outside and gently closed the door behind me. Neighbors were already gathering, lured by the shouting. Rico jogged over from the barn, wiping his hands on his flannel. "Everything okay, Senor Ethan?" Before I could answer, Beatrice reached into her handbag. Her face twisted into something I can only describe as madness. And then I saw the glint of metal. "Back off," she screamed, pulling a black pistol and pointing it directly at my chest. Gasps echoed from the crowd. Rico froze, eyes wide. Beatrice's hands were shaking, her finger twitching near the trigger. "You ruined everything. You arrogant, smug outsider. You think you can come here with your money and your goats and build your ridiculous fence and destroy what I built?" "Beatrice," I said quietly, hands raised. "You don't want to do this. Put the gun down." She didn't even hear me. She was muttering now, disconnected from reality, talking about her ex-husband, her children, her control, her sacrifices. They all turned on me. "Just like you." Then time snapped. She screamed and her finger twitched. The gunshot cracked like a whip across the ridge. I flinched as the bullet sailed past my ear, splintering the porch beam behind me. And then, Justice. From the side pasture, my 320-pound ram exploded into motion like a wool-covered rocket. Beatrice didn't even see him coming. In a flash of hooves and fury, he launched across the driveway, slammed into her midsection like a wrecking ball, and sent her airborne in a spinning arc that would have made an Olympic gymnast jealous. Her purse flew one way, the gun another. And she? She landed in my horse trough with a splash that drenched half the crowd. The silence that followed was absolute. For a few seconds, no one moved. Beatrice surfaced, sputtering, hair matted in green slime, her suit dripping with algae and horse slobber. Rico, recovering from the shock, scooped up the pistol with a rag and backed away slowly. "Got it," he muttered. "Senor Ethan, I think your ram just saved your life." Then the laughter began. First one neighbor. Then another. And soon, the entire crowd was roaring. Beatrice clawed at the side of the trough, trying to climb out with what little dignity she had left. "This is assault. This is animal violence," she shrieked. "You're all going to jail." That's when Sheriff Nolan arrived, cruiser screeching to a halt. He stepped out slowly, taking in the scene, the crowd, the ram, the soaking wet woman in the trough, and Rico holding a gun with 2 fingers like it was covered in acid. He took one look at Beatrice and said, "Ma'am, I believe you're under arrest." She froze. "I am the HOA president. I know people." "You also fired a stolen weapon in a residential area," Nolan replied, pulling out handcuffs. "That's aggravated assault, reckless endangerment, and unlawful possession of a firearm. That's before we get to whatever the FBI is going to charge you with." Her face drained of color. "Stolen?" "Yeah," Nolan nodded. "Filed 3 years ago. From a shop in Billings. You've got a lot of explaining to do." As he read her rights, Rico leaned over to me. "So, Justice gets extra fee tonight, yes?" I laughed, exhausted and shaking. "Yeah. All the apples he wants." News spread fast. By lunchtime, the footage had gone viral. Neighbors shared the video across Facebook and Nextdoor, and within hours the hashtag #RamForJustice was trending. But beneath the memes and media circus, a darker truth emerged. As investigators searched Beatrice's home, they discovered files, dozens of them, detailing residents' personal lives, financials, even health records. Surveillance logs. Threat assessments. Leverage. She'd been running a full-blown intimidation racket. But that wasn't the worst part. Buried among the documents was a map. It showed Ethan's property, highlighted, marked with the word Access Road. Attached was a memo from a company called Red Horizon Minerals. They were planning something. And my fence? It had blocked their route. Beatrice Langford hadn't gone rogue. She was just the front line. The real war was only just beginning. By the time the sheriff hauled Beatrice Langford out of the horse trough, dripping algae and screeching about conspiracies, I knew things had spiraled far beyond a petty fence dispute. What began as a battle over cedar posts had exploded into something much darker, an entire community held hostage by one woman's obsession with control. But that wasn't even the half of it. Because after justice, the 320-pound wool-covered wrecking ball sent her flying, and the deputies took her away on charges of aggravated assault and illegal firearm possession, the real story began to unfold. It started with the search of her home. Sheriff Nolan, now fully invested after the near shooting, obtained a warrant within hours. What they found behind a locked basement door would make national headlines within days. A wall of filing cabinets. Each drawer labeled with names of Riverstone Ridge residents. Inside? Bank statements, medical records, divorce papers, surveillance photos, even recordings. Files that no HOA president should ever possess. She had documented everything, from Mrs. Fielding's overdue mortgage to the Jackson boys' therapy sessions. But the most damning piece was tucked behind her desk, a steel box marked Pinecrest, RH. Inside were contracts, wire transfers, and memos stamped with the logo of a company I'd never heard of, Red Horizon Minerals. One document stopped me cold. A map. My property, Silver Elk Ranch, outlined in red. Next to it, a handwritten note, access blocked. Remove obstacle. Expedite acquisition. Suddenly everything clicked into place. The rule changes, the fines, the harassment, the spray paint. It wasn't just about power. It was about access. My ranch sat on something they wanted, and my fence was in the way. Sheriff Nolan looked at me grimly. "We're out of our depth here." That's when the feds showed up. Unmarked black SUVs rolled into town like a silent army. Leading them was FBI agent Carla Ruiz, late 40s, hair in a tight bun, blazer sharp enough to cut through steel. She introduced herself with a firm handshake and eyes that didn't miss a thing. "Mr. Monroe, you've stirred up something big. We've been tracking Red Horizon for over a year. Your footage of Beatrice and the files we found in her house just cracked the case wide open. Over the next 48 hours, my living room turned into a war room. Maps, charts, and evidence folders were spread across my dining table. Agent Ruiz explained it all. Red Horizon Minerals had been targeting rural communities across 8 states, looking for land rich in rare earth elements. But instead of negotiating, they used shell companies like Pinecrest Holdings to buy up property cheap. How? By manipulating local HOAs. They installed figurehead presidents, controlling, unstable, easily manipulated, and fed them money, legal support, and dirt on their neighbors. The goal was to harass homeowners until they either sold or were forced out through fines and code violations. Once they sold, Red Horizon swooped in under different LLCs and gobbled up the land. My ranch? It sat atop one of the largest untapped rare earth deposits in Montana, worth over $180 million by conservative estimates. And my 7-foot cedar fence? It had blocked their planned access road. You weren't the target because of the fence, Ruiz said. You were the target because you didn't fold. The evidence kept coming. Beatrice's vice president, Gordon Ellis, flipped the moment federal agents knocked on his door. He provided emails, phone recordings, and minutes from secret HOA meetings, all showing he'd been in on it from the start. But unlike Beatrice, Gordon was smart enough to know when to cut a deal. She was a hammer, he admitted. Red Horizon liked her because she didn't ask questions. She just hit people until they moved. The most chilling moment came when Ruiz showed me footage from one of Beatrice's hidden cameras. She'd placed it in the community mailroom. The video showed her reading residents' mail, opening financial notices, even photographing prescriptions. She built her power on secrets, Ruiz said. And when she ran out of leverage, she used force. Red Horizon executives, once untouchable, now found themselves under indictment. The FBI raided their offices in Denver, seized bank accounts, and began freezing assets. News broke fast. Reporters flooded Riverstone Ridge. CNN, Fox, even local rancher radio stations picked up the story. Headlines read, Ram saves rancher from corrupt HOA, and Justice with horns, Ram ends HOA tyranny. Justice, of course, became a national icon. Kids started wearing shirts with his face on them, and one artist even painted a mural downtown of him leaping heroically, cape and all. Through it all, I tried to stay grounded. I testified before a grand jury. So did Rico. So did half my neighbors. We told our stories, the fines, the harassment, the threats. Some cried. Some shook with anger. All of us were tired. Tired of living under fear. When the case went to trial, Beatrice looked like a ghost of her former self. Gone were the red suits and heels. She wore a prison jumper and shackles. The courtroom was packed. Families who had been forced out returned to watch justice play out. I took the stand and recounted it all. The confrontation. The vandalism. The gun. And of course, the ram. Her defense attorney tried to paint her as mentally unwell. A victim of corporate manipulation. But the evidence was overwhelming. The files. The gun. The money. The secret memos. It was too much to ignore. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Verdict: guilty on all counts: fraud, racketeering, assault with a deadly weapon, conspiracy to commit extortion. She was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Gordon Ellis received 8. Red Horizon Minerals was ordered to pay over $75 million in restitution to victims across multiple states. Their executives? Indicted and awaiting trial. Riverstone Ridge, once a fractured and fearful community, came together. The HOA was dissolved and rebuilt with oversight. Term limits were implemented. New elections held. Walter Brenner, the soft-spoken Vietnam vet who'd once been fined for flying an American flag too high, was voted in as the new HOA president. Mrs. Patel, whose vegetable garden had been deemed agriculturally offensive, became treasurer. I declined any formal role. I'd done what I came to do. With a portion of the civil settlement, I founded New Dawn Ranch, an animal therapy and wellness center for kids with disabilities and veterans with PTSD. We converted the old horse barn into classrooms and treatment spaces. Justice, ever the star, became the face of the program. He was gentle with children, stood still for photos, and loved being hand-fed apples by giggling toddlers. Rico brought his family up from El Salvador. He now runs daily operations and teaches livestock care. The community, once ruled by fear and fines, is now filled with laughter, fresh gardens, and open gates. One afternoon, as I watched a group of kids braid flowers into Justice's horns, my phone rang. It was a Los Angeles number. Mr. Monroe? This is Claire Winslow with Lionsgate Films. We'd love to discuss adapting your story for the screen. We're thinking Chris Pine or maybe Jeremy Renner for your role. And don't worry, we're in talks with Pixar about animating the ram. I laughed. I hadn't planned on becoming a headline. I just wanted peace. But I guess sometimes peace has to be earned. That evening, I sat on my porch with Rico, watching the Montana sunset pour gold across the hills. Justice lay at our feet, eyes half closed, satisfied with a belly full of apples. You know, I said quietly, it's funny how it all started with a fence. Rico nodded. Sometimes the smallest things reveal the biggest lies. And sometimes, I added, the biggest justice comes with horns. He chuckled, raising his beer. To fences. To rams. And to not backing down. We clinked bottles. In the distance, the wind moved through the cedars, whispering like a promise. Riverstone Ridge had changed. We all had. But the one thing that stayed the same? Justice still watched over us, steady, proud, and ready. Just in case someone else thought they could take what wasn't theirs. If there's one thing I've learned from my time at Silver Elk Ranch, it's this: never underestimate the quiet ones, and never assume the rules only apply to others. I came to Montana looking for peace. What I found instead was a battlefield disguised as a neighborhood where power was abused, silence was enforced, and good people were bullied out of their own homes. But sometimes, the fight you didn't ask for becomes the stand you were meant to take. The cedar fence I built wasn't just about property lines. It became a symbol of boundaries, emotional, legal, and moral. And when those boundaries were violated by greed and corruption, I had a choice: back down or stand tall. I chose to stand. Not with anger, but with truth, research, and quiet persistence. And sometimes, that's all it takes to spark change: one person saying, "This isn't right," and refusing to be intimidated into silence. To anyone out there dealing with injustice, whether it's a corrupt system, a toxic workplace, or a neighborhood bully, remember this: document everything, speak with purpose, and surround yourself with people who believe in doing what's right. You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to stand long enough for others to realize they're not alone. And yes, sometimes your hero doesn't wear a cape. Sometimes, they've got horns and weigh 320 pounds. From all of us here at US Daily Story, thank you for listening to this wild ride of a tale, one about standing your ground, protecting your home, and discovering that justice doesn't always come from the courtroom. Sometimes, it charges at 25 miles per hour and lands in a horse trough. We appreciate your time, your attention, and your support more than you know. If this story resonated with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever stood up to something that felt too big to fight? Did a small act of defiance ever change your life? Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the channel if you want more stories like this, real or inspired by reality, that remind us all that courage isn't loud, but it is persistent. Until next time, take care of your neighbors, stand firm in what you believe, and if trouble ever comes knocking, maybe consider getting yourself a guard ram. Just in case.